Hello and welcome to StudyIQ. In this session, we will discuss about the recent announcement by the Delhi government to fix cap on the hospital profits. So, our topic is proposal to fix cap on hospital profits. So what is the issue? Recently, the Delhi government has proposed or announced a proposal with regard to fixing cap on the profits by private hospitals. So we know that private hospitals charge exorbitant prices from the consumers and many a times this becomes unaffordable for the poor people. So medical services or healthcare services many a times became unaffordable for poor section in the society because of high profits which are being charged by the private hospitals. So in this lecture we will analyze regarding the announcement made by the Delhi government and what are the implications and how this is going to affect the health sector and is it practically possible. All these things we will discuss in this session. Let us quickly see the background at which the government has made this proposal. First of all, the aim of the government was to protect the consumers or the poor people from profiteering by the private hospital owners. So recently there was a public outrage with regard to the high prices charged by the private hospitals for dengue. So this was the recent incident and this made a lot of protest in the society and this led to the proposal being made by the Delhi government. This is electorally a very good initiative. This is very pleasing, but practical side of it there is a need for analysis and we are trying to do that in this lecture. So let us see what was the decision made by the Delhi government. So decision. There were many cases reported that private hospitals are charging exorbitant profit from the poor people, from consumers actually, but this will affect the poor section of the society. So in order to address this problem, a high-level committee was appointed. So the purpose of this expert committee was to suggest on measures to reduce the out-of-pocket expenditure in healthcare services and also to suggest measures to improve the overall access to healthcare in India. So this was the purpose of the committee, expert committee. Also, NPPA, National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority, NPPA reported that private hospitals are charging around 350 to 1740% profit margins on medicines and consumables. So you should understand 350 to 1740% is the profit margin. This is merely the profit margin of the hospitals with regard to medicines and other consumables. So what will be the actual cost? It will be very less and when it reaches the consumer it is highly inflated and this makes medical services or healthcare services inaccessible for the poor people in the society. So in order to reduce the burden of the consumers on healthcare expenses, the Delhi government has announced a 50% cap on profit. So the profit on medicines we have already seen 350 to 1740%. So Delhi government has announced 50% should be the cap on profit by the private hospitals. Now let us see what are the concerns with regard to this proposal. Concerns. One criticism of this proposal is that this proposal has not considered the huge capital expenditure and operational expenditure of private hospitals. Capital as well as operational expenditures. So in the modern times, almost all the private hospitals has all the facilities, all medical facilities are available. So for all these medical facilities, they have to make a very huge investment in the form of capital. So investment made by the private hospitals are very huge. And the operational expenses are also very high because of the modern facilities they give to their customers. So while making the proposal, the government did not take care of the capital as well as the operational expenses of the private hospitals. This is one criticism. The second one is the land cost. Land cost means that the cost of the land wherein which the hospital has been established. See, in case of private hospitals, you will notice that most of the private hospitals are in places which are easily accessible for the public, which means mostly, if in case of urban areas, mostly it will be in the cities. Even if it is in the rural areas, these will be in the places which are easily accessible for the people. So Accessibility is one important factor which has to be considered when it comes to private hospital. They provide easy access. So the land cost of such areas would be very high. But most of the government hospitals on the other hand will be in remote areas or in areas which are less accessible for the public. So the land cost of these areas will also be very high. So this was also not considered while making the proposal. Again, coming to the net profit. So we have seen that the profit margins are around 350 to 1700 percentage. That is a profit margin. But when it comes to net profit, how is net profit calculated? Gross profit minus depreciation will give you net profit. So we have already seen the concept of gross and net. And also we have seen what is depreciation. So in short, what is depreciation? Depreciation is the value of wear and tear that happens to capital goods. So in case of a hospital, most of the goods are capital goods. Machineries, infrastructure, building, everything is capital, and the investment which has to be made for these goods are very huge. So investments are very high and these are very costly goods also. So there should be some depreciation for this goods. So after reducing the depreciation, we will arrive at net. So gross profit may be 350 to 1700 percentage as calculated by the NPPA. But when it comes to net profit, that is after reducing the depreciation, what happens is that the net profit of the hospitals are nowhere around the findings of the NPPA. So findings was that 350 to 1700 percentage is the profit margins of the hospitals. But when depreciation is reduced, it is nowhere near this figure. So you should understand that the capital goods which are employed by the private hospitals are very huge in number and they will have to undergo depreciation. So net profit is nowhere near this figure. Another concern is that if there will be a cap on profits of the hospital, that is according to the announcement or that is according to the proposal made by the Delhi government, if private hospitals are given a cap of profit at the rate of 50%, what will happen? In order to compromise the current profit levels, so there is a current profit level for the hospital, and in order to make a compromise on the current profit level, what they will do is they will increase the rent, room rent or the cost of surgeries. So surgery cost or the room rent will go up. So what will happen? So as a result, the cost of the rooms as well as the surgeries will go up, and this will again burden the poor people in the society. So nowhere it is going to help them. Another concern is that if according to the proposal, if the cap is implemented, what will happen? The services of the private healthcare hospitals will come down. So when the services of the private healthcare comes down, what will happen? There will be a demand supply gap, which means demand of healthcare will be more than the supply. So what will happen? This gap should be somehow filled. Otherwise it is very difficult for the public. Healthcare is an essential commodity and ideally there should not be a gap between the demand and supply of healthcare or any essential commodity. So if there is a demand and supply gap, this gap should be filled, and we must understand that the government or the public hospitals are in no capacity to fill these gaps. So there is a shortage of hospitals or healthcare facilities in the public domain or in the government domain. This has to be somehow completed by the private itself. See, if we take an example, in case of Delhi itself, there are only 2.7 beds available per 1,000 people. And according to the WHO, World Health Organization, the WHO recommends that there should be minimum 5 beds for 1,000 people. In case of Delhi is the capital city, and in case of Delhi itself it's merely 2.7. Then what will be the condition of other states or other villages? When it comes to rural areas or backward areas, the situation is more pathetic and we are highly dependent on private sector for healthcare. And if government is equipped in order to meet the demand supply gap, it is fine. But in this scenario, this is going to harm the consumers or harm the public more. Another concern is with regard to the procurement price. So procurement price. the government has no proper mechanism to identify or to calculate the procurement price of the hospitals. So the government does not know at what price is the private hospitals procuring the medicines. So from the supply side, this must be ensured. So the government should know what is the profit margin of the pharmaceuticals. Only then government can ensure or come to a conclusion what is the profit margin of the hospital. For that, procurement price needs to be calculated properly, and there is no proper mechanism to monitor the procurement price. Also, even if this proposed cap is put on the private hospitals, there is no proper mechanism to monitor the private hospitals. So, monitoring of private hospitals is also a major challenge. Why? Because if there is no proper monitoring mechanism, the government is not sure whether the cap is being applied or not. So, this is also a administrative challenge. Another criticism is that if this cap is being put, what will happen is that the innovation and investment in the private hospitals will come down. So now they are less motivated to invest more in order to bring in new innovations in healthcare services. Why? Because the profit margin is less. They have no motivation to invest or to innovate. So this will also affect the healthcare services. Another criticism is with regard to the supply. Either the quality or the volume of the supply will come down. So there are chances both can come down also. Quality and volume. Let us see. Quality. For example, if there is a reputed doctor and he gives his services for a bit higher cost. So if government puts this cap, what will happen? He will either migrate to some other countries where he will get better returns, or else he will move out of the hospital and he will start a clinic, or he will practice from home itself, which means that the quality of the services will come down. Again, coming to volume, let us take the example of stent. So previously government had reduced the prices of stent, and this has led to a shortage in the supply. So supply became less than the demand, and this has put the consumers into a big trouble. So this can happen here also. So all these are concerns and challenges we have to overcome, and we have to find solution for all these challenges and concerns before putting a cap on the profit of the private hospitals. So what is the way forward? We have seen that private hospitals are charging exorbitant prices from the consumers, which has led to making the healthcare services unaffordable for the general public. This is a very big problem in the society, and this needs to be addressed. But the thing is, the root cause of this problem needs to be addressed, and the proposal to cap the profits of the private hospitals are no way a sustainable solution. So we must understand that the root cause need to be identified and measures should be taken in order to rectify the root cause of this issue. What is the root cause of this issue? The root cause is shortage of public healthcare services. So we have already seen there is a shortage of public healthcare services in India. So this needs to be addressed. The government should come up with more infrastructure, more technology, more healthcare facilities. The government should adopt international standards and practices in healthcare in which hospitals, government hospitals or public healthcare centers. So if this shortage is addressed, what will happen? People will depend more on public healthcare or government hospitals, and this will lead to decreased demand in the private healthcare, and they will be compelled to reduce the prices. So now in this scenario where there is a shortage of public healthcare facilities, it is no way going to help the general public if the government makes it compulsory to put a cap. So what has to be done is the public hospitals should come up with more facilities, more infrastructure, better quality of services. So it will attract the general public towards the government hospitals. The government can also think about subsidizing either the hospitals or the households. Subsidies can be provided, or various health insurance can be provided. So insurance can be provided. All this can be done from the government side.